Now, Labour used to dominate Scottish politics, but for the last 8 years they've been in opposition at Holyrood in the Scottish Parliament, and in May's general election they lost 40 of their 41 Westminster seats to the Scottish Nationalists. Today, Jeremy Corbyn is in Scotland. It's his first visit since becoming Labour leader. He says winning back support from the SNP will be one of his priorities. But can he do it? Well, we did ask for a member of Scottish Labour onto the programme, but they're otherwise engaged probably with Mr Corbyn. But joining me now from Glasgow, Tom Harris. He lost his Labour seat in Glasgow at the last election. Mr Harris, welcome to the programme.
Hello.
Mr Corbyn says that he's going to focus on winning Scotland back. Does he have a chance of doing it?
I think if Jeremy is in Scotland today and he doesn't go to Faz Lane and lie down on the road in front of it to stop access, then we can all breathe a sigh of relief. But I don't think he is getting the right information and advice about what's actually happening in Scotland, because I think he sees everything in Scotland about left versus right, and it's not that anymore. In May, Labour performed appallingly at the polls, but it wasn't because the SNP outlefted us, outflanked us on the left. It was simply because after the referendum, the question that Scottish voters asked themselves in the polling station in May was completely different from the question that they'd asked in previous years. In previous years it was, which party will best protect Scotland from the Tories? In May this year the question was, which party will best stand up for Scotland? Which party will fly the saltire most enthusiastically? And of course the answer to that was the SNP, and the solutions that Jeremy is coming up with, I just don't think they're relevant to the debate up here.
Well, John MacDonald, the Shadow Chancellor now, he's claimed in his speech that Labour is now the only anti-austerity party in Scotland. His argument was that the SNP's claims to be anti-austerity were not really true. Labour was now, under Mr Corbyn, the anti-austerity party. Does that have cut through in Scotland?
I mean, it might, but as I say, I think looking at this debate in Scotland from a left versus right prism, I just don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's relevant. Now, we were on the doorsteps for months leading up to the general election, and we would talk to voters about zero-hour contracts, about austerity, about taxation, about bus regulation, and people would nod politely. They'd close the doors, and then they'd vote SNP. They weren't listening to us, and I don't think they're going to be listening to us even now, because I just don't think that moving further to the left is going to work. And the key thing to remember here is that the SNP are not a party of the left. They have very sensibly placed themselves on the centre ground of Scottish politics, where, like in the rest of the country, general elections are won. And they didn't outflank us on the left. In fact, most of their policies are very sensibly centrist.
What about Mr Corbyn's clear-cut opposition to Trident, which of course is based in Scotland? Will that help Labour in Scotland?
I very much doubt it. I mean, for a start, I think you've got a lot of former Labour voters who voted SNP last time. Nicola Sturgeon put her finger on the button very soon after Corbyn was elected leader by saying, look, if Labour isn't in a position to form a government at the UK level, which they are not because of Jeremy's leadership, then why would voters move back to the Labour Party from the SNP, irrespective of Trident? I mean, I was re-elected for the second time in 2010 when Trident was an issue, and I had a massive majority, and I just don't think Trident was a big issue this time either. I just, some people will say they're opposed to Trident, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will switch parties to oppose it.
Mr Corbyn's told BBC Scotland that he also thinks Labour suffered in Scotland because they joined with the Tories and with others in the Better Together campaign to keep the union together, to fight the independence referendum. Is there truth in that?
Yes, there is a bit of truth in that. I think it was the right decision, and I think that if we had run a very separate campaign, there would have been all sorts of strategic problems associated with that, and the attack from the SNP would have been identical. It would have still been Labour and the Tories on the same side of the argument, because we would still have been campaigning for a no vote. But they're getting closer to the point of Scottish politics, which is that the referendum did change everything. It wasn't that it made people more left-wing, it was that it made people think far more about Scotland, about the Scottish flag, rather than left versus right politics. Now, personally, I don't think that was a particularly healthy development, but that's the reality of the situation. And so far, I just don't see Jeremy or his team addressing that.
One of the challenge, the rather large insect just went past you there, Mr. Harris. I hope you're all right. You didn't see it. One of the challenges that Mr. Corbyn has set himself is for Labour to regain some ground in the Holyrood elections next March, I believe, or maybe next May. So anyway, in the spring of next year, when the Scottish Parliament is up for election. Yeah. I would suggest that at the moment, that's not necessarily a test you'd want to set yourself.
Oh, I would agree. I've spoken to very few MSPs, Labour MSPs, who think there's very much of a chance of holding on to any of our first past the post seats. We have 15 of those at the moment out of 73. And most people are pretty pessimistic. And I would say particularly after Jeremy's election. I think the best thing that Jeremy could do, of course, he's the UK Labour leader. He has got to come to every part of the country, including Scotland, and of course that's the right thing to do. I hope that for the Labour Party's sake, he will take a step back and let Kezia Dugdale lead the campaign and be front and centre. Kezia is a much more uniting character. She is very moderate, very sensible. She is great on TV. She is great with people. I think if we're going to have any kind of resurgence in the polls, it has to be left to Kezia, not Jeremy Corbyn.
All right. Tom Harris, thank you for joining us from Glasgow.